Transforming care through genomic medicine, personalized therapeutics, health services and outcomes research, and innovations in healthcare delivery. We're Children's Mercy Kansas City, presenting our audio interview series, Transformational Pediatrics, with host Dr. Michael Smith.
Our topic today is Mercy Tape, taking the guesswork out of pediatric weight estimation. My guest is Dr. Susan Abdel-Rahman. Dr. Rahman is the Section Chief of Personalized Therapeutics at Children's Mercy, Kansas City. Dr. Rahman, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. So let's first just talk about the importance of accurate weight in pediatrics. How important really is that in, say, dosing medication for children?
Sure. Weight pretty much drives everything we do in the care of children. We use weight to identify the most accurate dose for children. Weight is used to identify the correct volume of resuscitation fluids for children. Weights are even used to calculate cardiac voltage for resuscitation of children. So it really drives just about all the decisions we make when caring for children.
And so, when you think of a general, pediatric practice, what are the old-fashioned way was just get them on the scale as best you can. Is there a problem with that? Are those scales not accurate? Or do we need to move this technology up? What's the issue there?
No, the scales are the gold standard. They're highly accurate, and they're really the first thing we do whenever we see a child. Weight is taken as part of a vital sign. The reason we developed Mercy Tape was for settings where a scale is not available. So there are resource-restricted settings where you don't have access to a scale. There are emergency and trauma settings, again, where you might not be able to weigh the child in time to make the decisions that you need. And that there are some subsets of children that are wheelchair-bound that may have other mobility issues that cannot be weighed in a traditional way.
Yeah, so that's really it. So Mercy Tape is really the solution to the problem of not having a scale in a very specific setting. So let's talk a little bit about the Mercy Tape then. How does the Mercy Tape really work, and how does it really address this? How does it become the solution to the problem?
Sure. So Mercy Tape works by looking at markers of kind of growth and development. And we look at markers of how tall you are or growth velocity by looking at the length of a long bone. And we look at kind of how big you are by looking at the girth around a specific muscle segment. And so by applying kind of a mathematical algorithm to two of those measurements that we take just in one small area of the body, we're able to generate a strategy for estimating weight very quickly, really with the addition of just two simple numbers.
And so I'm sure you've compared then the Mercy Tape to, say, a more standard scale. How does the Mercy Tape measure up, if you will, if I can, to a standard, the gold standard scale? Yeah,
the Mercy Tape is actually highly accurate. So we're within 10% of the child's actual weight in over 80% of children, and within almost 100%, within 20% of their actual weight in almost 100% of children. So it's really quite close. We've also evaluated it against other standards that are used, and we are far more robust over a much broader population and a much more diverse population than the other methods that are being used are out there.
So how long has the Mercy Tape measure been around? When did this develop? Who was involved? And I guess where do you see this being best used?
Yeah. We first developed this, the original development took place around 2010, and it stemmed from work we were doing with the World Health Organization. We were involved with them trying to optimize dosing regimens for children with tuberculosis, HIV, malaria, that type of thing. And one of the stakeholders at the meeting raised a very important point, which is it's wonderful to have these accurate dosing guidelines for children, but for those of us that don't have the ability to weigh a child, what are we expected to do? And so it started by looking at the existing strategies that are out there, and not having a weight on a child is really not an option. So for individuals that didn't have the capacity to weigh children, they were using surrogates based on age or surrogates based on length. And when you actually broke those down, they're not all highly accurate. They introduce a lot of error. They don't cover the broad spectrum of age in children, and they really fail at the extremes of age and the extremes of weight. So our malnourished children and our overweight, obese children, these methods were really performing poorly. We didn't want to necessarily invent something new if there was something out there that existed. But after looking at what was available, we realized that there was the need for a more accurate estimation measure. So it was originally developed with resource-restricted settings in mind. And, it's hard for us perhaps in developed countries to appreciate just how critical or acute the need is. But, there are over 2 billion children in the world, and about a billion of them are living in poverty. And about 270 million of them don't have access to basic health care services. So this was really addressed to identify a need for that population, but then to extend out to our medical partners in the emergency room and in trauma settings and in rehabilitation medicine, for example, where we're using the Mercy tape not only to estimate weight, but also to estimate height, again, in children with mobility impairments.
Yes, so is Children's Mercy then taking on a very proactive role in educating some of the community physicians on how to use this weight estimation, even then going out to some of these underdeveloped countries? I mean, what role is the hospital taking in educating doctors on using this?
Yeah, we tried to be incredibly responsible in the development and dissemination. So this was developed in numerous studies. So we did studies here in the U.S. to validate. We went overseas to West Africa, to India, and to China to make sure that it was broadly applicable, understanding the cultural issues that we had to deal with. I mean, it was developed specifically with cultural issues in mind, where we might not have an age of a child if they're not maintaining birth records. And we might not want to access other limbs in a Muslim country for children where we don't want to lift their skirts. So this was really done to make sure that we were sensitive to the needs of communities that required it. We created instructional materials that were completely nonverbal, that are all illustrated to really show how to use the method. Now, there's still the caveat that it requires some simple addition, and we've got ways to get around that as well, but we've tried to be incredibly proactive in creating our educational materials. There hasn't been a lot of education in our local community because most of our children have access to clinics where there are scales. But whenever we are contacted from settings that require this technology, we work very closely with them to make sure they've got the education materials they need and to make sure that we provide additional instruction as they deem is relevant for their population. And we get requests for this device, I would say, about once every 2 weeks. We're mailing all over the world.
Wow. Well, this is really awesome, because here you are really leading the way for providing a solution to a significant problem when the gold standard scale is not available. As you mentioned, weight it's key to taking care of these children in all kinds of different settings. So this is really great. And Dr. Rahman, I want to thank you for the work that you've done with the Mercy tape, and thank you for coming on the show. You're listening to Transformational Pediatrics with Children's Mercy Kansas City. For more information, you can go to childrensmercy.org. That's childrensmercy.org. I'm Dr. Michael Smith. Thanks for listening.